I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm the Omni viewer, and I'm back to continue reviewing dinosaurs from the Jurassic Park Hammond collection. We start with what is perhaps the most unexpected addition to the line, the Ceratosaurus from Jurassic Park 3.
I would call this dinosaur unexpected for 2 reasons. First and foremost, you would think that when it comes to representing Jurassic Park 3, the Spinosaurus or Pteranodon would be prioritized. Of course, the Ceratosaurus does provide a memorable moment from the film, but that's mostly thanks to how random and out of place it is. True, many dinosaurs can be considered one-scene wonders in execution, but even among these the Ceratosaurus stands out. He shows up at random as though he's going to be a threat, then he gets a whiff of Spinosaurus poo, stares directly into the camera as if to say he doesn't get paid enough for this work, and then runs off never to be seen again. This means that he has the only official fourth wall break in the whole series, and that's his primary claim to fame. Then again, if I think back, he never got a figure from the actual JP3 toy line, so I guess he's overdue. Whatever the reason, he's here now, so let's see how he turned out. As expected, the Ceratosaurus comes with the tail detached, and like the Baryonyx, it must be inserted sideways and twisted. This is very easy. All told, the Ceratosaurus is a mid-sized dinosaur, larger than the Baryonyx, but smaller than the Indoraptor, which is appropriate since this is a smaller variant of Carnosaur. The color is what stands out the most about this guy. Colors on the other Jurassic dinosaurs I've looked at have been relatively muted, staying in the realm of browns, greens, and grays. Any brighter or shinier colors were only applied in small portions. For the most part, the Ceratosaurus is also painted in earthy tones, but he's much brighter than the others. He's mostly a light sandy yellow, broken up by chocolate brown stripes, but midway up the torso, the color red appears and reaches all the way to the head where it dominates. This color scheme was another thing that helped him stand out in the movie, and it translates nicely onto the figure. True, there's no real gradient on the actual cranium, but the way the figure comes together keeps it from looking bad. Unfortunately, the paint is not perfect this time around thanks to those brown stripes. There are numerous places along the entire body where the brown did not sink in between the scales, leaving tiny gaps where the yellow and red show through. If this were on only 1 or 2 places, I might cut it some slack, but it happens all along the figure's body, sometimes in clusters. Not to mention the stripes are noticeably asymmetrical, not quite lining up precisely on either side. It's like the lines were off by just a hair and the result is 2 halves that don't match. I'm honestly surprised by this, since the paint on the other figures has been excellent so far, so what happened here? Honestly, I expected more from this figure based on what I'd seen before. Well, even if the paint is a bit sloppy, the overall detail still looks good. Every inch of the Ceratosaurus is detailed, and aside from the expected JP stamp on the right foot, it all comes together for a nice organic effect. The skin has an overall pebbly texture with a smooth underside and a single row of very short spikes running down the back that fades away halfway down the tail. Joints, once again, are separated by irregular seams as opposed to sharp edges, thus adding to the aforementioned organic look. The horn from which this dinosaur gets its name is elliptical and blunted at the top, which matches what we see in the movie. The claws on the hands and feet also appear a bit stubbier than those on the other figures, and even his teeth are a bit more rounded. This bluntness is especially true on the hand claws, and the effect creates an image that's not quite as threatening as the other predatory dinosaurs in the line. In some ways he looks almost comical, which I guess is sort of appropriate given his claim to fame in these movies. And let's not forget the articulation. The Ceratosaurus has 17 joints total, including 2 on the head that allow the upper and lower portions to move independently of each other. This feature was also kind of featured on the Baryonyx, but it didn't allow for her upper jaw to move all that much. Here, though, it's a significant addition, allowing for a wider range of expression from the dinosaur's face. All other joints can move just about any direction you desire, and the tail once again has a wire inside for bending options. Well, that's all I can really think to say, so let's summarize. The Ceratosaurus has the worst paint job of the figures I've seen so far, but that's limited entirely to the brown stripes. With every other detail, though, he looks really good. After reviewing the Velociraptor and finding some odd flaws within it, I hoped it was an anomaly. Thanks to the Ceratosaurus, I'm willing to believe that it was. Again, paint aside, the figure still looks impressive both alongside them and on its own. Sure, it's got some issues, but not as many as the movie it hails from, so I'm okay with adding it to the collection.
Alright, now that that's done, it's time to move on to the big one. Ladies and gentlemen, the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Okay, blah 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 tail needs attaching, you know the drill by now. The most significant detail we can get from the box is that this is the original T-Rex, the one who appeared in the first Jurassic Park and would make her return in the Jurassic World movies, sometimes called Rexy by the fans. This is of course expected since that's the movie which began it all. Rexy is the biggest dinosaur in the line, at 25 inches long from end to end and roughly 8 inches at the hip, though her head can be angled up to stand even taller. Being so big, you can imagine that detail is no issue. The T-Rex in these movies has always had skin that's more leathery than scaly, and that's recreated here as expertly as we've seen on any of these figures. There is some variation on the head where the skin is a bit rougher. Now, we don't get many good looks at the top of Rexy's head in the movies, but the few glimpses we have still match up with this. Much like the raptor, it seems that the feet are just a bit bigger than they are in the movie, though again like the raptor, this was probably done to ensure that the figure can stand on its own. I remember the original Kenner T-Rex, which I still have packed away somewhere, had smaller feet and always needed to be propped up so it could stand. Then again, its legs couldn't move either, so that was also a factor. Anyway, the Hammond Rex has big feet, but they're not as proportionally huge as the raptor's feet, which helps prevent the clown shoes effect. Oddly enough, the dew claws are much bigger than they ought to be, which is weird given how accurate the rest of the figure is. Rexy has two interesting touches to her that aren't found on the other figures we've seen. First up, the jowly things in the mouth, still not sure what you call those, are made of soft rubber as opposed to being hard plastic sculpted as part of the jaw. This allows them to flex depending on how wide the jaws are open, and they don't interfere with the inside of the mouth. I can understand why the smaller figures don't have this, but the fact that they incorporated it into a larger figure is a nice detail. Then we have the eyes. On the other dinosaurs in the line, the eyes are simply painted onto the head, and to be clear, they all look good. For Rexy, though, the eyes are inset and overlaid with a clear convex orb. This creates the illusion of eye movement. It's probably hard to tell in the video because of how small they are, but I've done my best to demonstrate what I mean. The convex nature of the orb allows the position of the pupil to change depending on what angle you're looking at her from. This can lead to angles where the pupil disappears entirely, thus making the dinosaur look possessed, but it's still a cool feature to help set her apart. Now, you would think that a figure this big would not have issues with paint, but unfortunately there are a few hiccups in this area. Most of the dark brown tiger stripes running down the back and tail are even, but smaller details are surprisingly asymmetrical. For example, there are extra dark brown markings above the right arm, but not above the left arm. Dark spots can be found on both sides of the lower jaw, but the patterns don't match. On the upper jaw, the light brown portion above the lip is wider on the left side than on the right side. A dark brown stripe runs down the left thigh, but not the right thigh. This asymmetry is really odd since you would think a larger figure would not have such issues. I would expect it on a smaller figure where the scale might make it harder to get things just so, yet the raptor is the smallest figure we've had so far and she doesn't have this problem. Well, the paint may have issues, but articulation is where the T-Rex reigns supreme. She is officially the most articulated figure in the line, with 25 separate movable parts plus the bendable wire in the tail. There are 2 knee joints for maximum leg mobility, segments along the neck and torso, wrist joints for the hands, a detail we've only seen on the Indoraptor, which isn't even part of the Hammond collection, and even the tongue can be moved. Now, these joints do have their limits, which is to be expected, but what you can do with them is quite impressive. You can even sort of recreate the iconic last shot from the original movie. It's not perfect, but it's close. The Hammond collection has delivered some interesting results since it began, but in much the same way that the T-Rex represents the movies, this T-Rex figure encapsulates the whole collection all on her own. Within this one figure, we can see the strengths and weaknesses of the line. There are problems, sure, but there are also a great many strengths that make her a worthy addition to any dinosaur fan's collection. So what if she's scientifically inaccurate? This is a movie dinosaur, quite possibly one of the most iconic examples thereof, and this figure is a splendid rendition of her.
As you can imagine, she doesn't come cheap, but even with the minor flaws, I'd say she's worth it. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Okay, so I've got a bunch of carnivores. I wonder if I should get any herbivores. Maybe later.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.